My very first investment was, I carry it with me at all times, is not a stock or a bond, but a silver dollar.
Welcome to Free Colorado News. I'm Ari Armstrong. Recently, Mark Skousen, an economist, spoke in Denver at a small business chamber of commerce event. Here, Professor Skousen discusses his background as an economist and financial advisor. While I don't always agree with Mr. Skousen, I find him to be an interesting figure.
I consider myself a professional economist, and if I think of the things I want to contribute to on this earthly life, one is to make a difference in economic theory and applied economics. And I've traveled the world. I've been to 71 countries. So we went to Israel with my uncle Cleon Skousen, who you may have heard of before, who's Glenn Beck has made famous with my uncle's book, The 5,000-Year Leap. I think there's a tendency for successful business people you just save and you use everything and you pour it into your business and you work full time and you never take any free time out to just see the world. And so we decided we would do that. So that's one of the things that I've always tried to do is take time out and take lots of vacations in between work and so forth. And one of my favorite Chinese philosophers, a Taoist by the name of Lin Yutang, Y-U-T-A-N-G, he's written a book called The Importance of Living. And so when I taught a course at Columbia Business School in 2004, 2005. And the first thing I did is, to these MBA students, the best and the brightest, I wrote on the board a quote from Lin Yutang. And he said, "The busy man cannot be wise, and the wise man is never too busy." And so when anyone calls me on the phone and says, "Do you have a moment? Are you busy?" My response is never busy, never too busy for you. I actually came back from my mission as a Mormon missionary in 1970 with $50 in my pocket, living at home. And by the time I graduated 2 years later with a master's degree, so I finished up my undergraduate and also did a master's degree. At the end of those 2 years, I had a job with the CIA, I had a fiance, and I had a fully paid for car. Now, how did I do that? I did that, first of all, by living at home and saving on rent. But more importantly, I took a lot of odd jobs. I was the editorial page editor of the student newspaper. I was a teaching assistant for my economics professor. During the summer, I did research for some economists up in Salt Lake City. So I just did a lot of different jobs. I think my education was better because I, right from the get-go, was always involved in making money on my own rather than just depending on my parents for my education and so forth. So I paid for my own schooling, and as a result of paying for my own schooling, I worked to get my degree faster. So when one of my economics professors said, "Well, there's this opening for the CIA. They always have an opening for a Mormon. They have a kind of a Mormon chair at the CIA." Now, do you know why that is? Because the Mormons take directions. They are very rule-oriented, and they follow through. So even though I failed all of the tests the CIA gives, I got the job. And they told me that for every job they give, there's 250 applicants. And they fill out the 50-page form, and you take a lie detector test, and they do all kinds of things. But my father was an FBI agent. My uncle Cleon was an FBI agent. That may have helped as well. I spoke a foreign language. I spoke Spanish, but the first desk they put me on was the Brazil desk. So that shows you how they're not quite all there. No, they speak Portuguese. Similar, but not exactly alike. In fact, the guy who spoke Portuguese was on the Venezuela desk. I just said, this is not for me, this is bureaucratic, so I wanted to get out of that, and so I applied for, I saw an ad in National Review for managing editor of a new investment newsletter. This was right during the financial revolution, where stocks and bonds, traditional investments were not doing well, but real estate, gold, silver, Swiss francs, all of that was doing really well. And so my very first investment was, I carry it with me at all times, is not a stock or a bond, but a silver dollar. The paper dollar is gradually being destroyed and will eventually be eliminated and replaced. I applied for this job as managing editor of the Inflation Survival Letter that had started publishing in 1970. The publisher also published Human Events, so he's very conservative. His name was Bob Kephart. And so he called me in and he says, Skousen, out of 250 applicants, just like the CIA, out of 250 applicants, you got the job. You know why you got the job? And I said, no, sir. He said, because you were the only one who knew a participle from a predicate. So I immediately went home to my wife and I said, sweetheart, I'm out of the CIA, I got this job, and I just have one question. She's an English major. I said, what's the difference between a participle and a predicate? So anyway, that was my introduction to a very exciting field of the financial revolution. I was right there at the very beginning when people like Harry Brown and Howard Ruff and Jim Blanchard, I don't know if any of these names mean anything to you, but it was a very exciting period where people were, survival foods, freeze-dried food, building your survival home. This was the first energy crisis, second energy crisis, inflation, double-digit interest rates rising. It was a whole new ball game, and I was very much involved with that. So I immediately started thinking, $14,000 a year working for this guy, working for Bob Kephart was not enough for me. I'm going to start my own special reports. I'm going to start writing my own books, and I'm going to start selling them. I'm going to run full-page ads in various newspapers and magazines. So that's what I started doing. So I started my own mail order business. By the way, I also got my PhD at George Washington University at that time. I really felt it was important, if I was going to make a contribution to economics, that I would get a PhD in economics from a major school. So I got it at George Washington University in 1977 on monetary economics, and that was very helpful, even though I got a bachelor's, master's, and a PhD in economics without ever taking a course in accounting, business, or finance. Now that shows how narrow the economics field is, if you can imagine. So I learned all that on my own. I learned accounting on my own. I took all of the Series 7 exams to be a broker. I took the commodities exam from the Chicago Board of Trade. I took all of the individual state exams that you have to take so that I could be well-versed in the area of finance. The biggest mistake any investor can make is to make money on his first trade, because then he thinks it's easy, and it's not. We ran these full-page ads. We did direct mail advertising, and we all did it out of the basement of our home. So if you went to the basement of our home, it was stacked full of thousands of books in boxes. And I hired local kids in the area, including Senator Hatch's son. This was all in Washington, D.C. In 1984, we said, we're sick and tired of the rat race. We're now going to move to the Bahamas. So we lived in the Bahamas for 2 years. It was life in living color. It was just a very exciting time period. We got involved with the local theater there. Our kids were, and all of us became actors, and we performed in Annie. Our daughter was Annie. We had 4 children at the time, from the ages of 11 down to 2. We were involved with our church work in a private school, St. Andrews, and it was really a wonderful experience. Let me back up. In 1980, I decided to break completely away from working for someone else. So I resigned as managing editor of the Inflation Survival and started my own newsletter. And I think I've got a copy of it here. I've been doing it now for 30 years. And this is my bread and basket, something I really love. It's called Forecasts and Strategies. I made a strategic decision to have a publisher publish the newsletter. So he does the printing, he does the promotion, he takes care of all of the complaints and all of the problems with customers. I don't have to deal with any of that. All I do is write the newsletter every month. So this allows me to live anywhere in the world. because I can write this newsletter anywhere in the world. So talk about maximization of my own free time. Sometimes you have to decide what you're good at, you specialize in it, and you don't try to do too much. I also wanted to get in the academic world, so I have taught as an adjunct professor at 3 universities, at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. I taught there for about 15 years. I taught investments, I taught economics, I taught Austrian economics, I taught a bunch of things. The position was opening to be the president of FEE, Foundation for Economic Education, in 2000. And so I applied for that job and got the position in 2001. So that's when I became president of a nonprofit organization. Moved to New York. I've been a lifetime Yankee fan, so this was heaven. Plus it was a financial center, and for Joanne it was Broadway and Lincoln Center and opera and musicals and all of this sort of thing. So it was really a wonderful opportunity. So we moved to a 35-room mansion in New York where the foundation was set up. And I was pretty arrogant. I thought, well, I'm going to take this city by storm. And a year later, I was fired from that position. So I always say, if you haven't been fired, you haven't lived. And I got Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor, as our speaker for our Liberty Conference. Well, that was, these are hardcore libertarians, and they didn't like Giuliani. So that was a big mistake. However, I did set up my first Freedom Fest, which was called FEE Fest at the time. I decided, let's have a national convention. Let's do something really different at FEE. Let's have a national convention, which has never been done before, and we'll have it in Las Vegas, which is the most libertarian town in the world. So I did this, and we had 850 people show up the very first time. It was very profitable. And the board was just in shock. They said, oh man, how did you do this? This is just incredible. So that's where the arrogance started getting in, saying, oh, I can do no wrong now. I'll get Rudy Giuliani to be our keynote speaker. And they said, we don't like the direction you're going. You're too liberal, you're too whatever it was. Within a year, I was teaching at Columbia University. My wife was teaching at Mercy College, and we were still in New York and having a great time. So I went back to writing the newsletter. I was teaching at Columbia, and then I had the idea. I said, you know, this Freedom Fest thing was so successful, I'm going to go back and start doing that again. So every year we do Freedom Fest in Las Vegas in July. Silver dollar is our symbol of money and freedom. And so we've been growing at 30% a year. It is a for-profit, not a non-profit organization. I believe for-profit gives you a lot better flexibility and focuses the mind. For some reason, non-profits, who is your customer? Well, your customer is your board of directors. Your customer is your people that you're asking money for. That's your customer. It's not what you're doing. So I think we decided to be for-profit for our Freedom Fest conference, and we're just growing very rapidly because we concentrate on what does the person want when they're coming to Freedom Fest.
Check out my book about Harry Potter's heroic fight for values at valuesofharrypotter.com.